Rex virus reign of Azazel, second of three parts. Let's do a thought experiment. One thing is what you do, and quite another is telling about it, narrating it. It's like asking yourself or someone else to tell you what you just did. Suddenly, language comes in between, whether inside your head, outside, or else by way of someone else's head. It's essentially the same thing. The language turn in civilization by way of education and later on by way of the news media to keep us updated as adults. You're going to find it very disconcerting, having to theorize, hypothesize, and whatnot in order to explain what you just did, even if it was done intuitively without as much as giving it a second thought. After a while, you give up trying and simply just do it, bypassing thinking about it. You can do this with certain personal things, but what about when it comes to educating your child or other children, other people's children, as in school or in the news media, to the general public having to narrate an event? You can't get around it. This is where the story or the narrative of the event comes to the fore. You do have to subscribe to certain canons. This is where dualism comes in and takes over as a fast and easy way of explaining things. The downside is it is wrong, it's false. The cost comes later on, unhinging people's minds, and sickness sets in quite naturally. Only God knows why. The problem isn't with culture per se, the doing it, but as part of civilization, giving reason of doing it. This is also called under the name of rationalization. Truth is simply that how we explain things to be is how things are made up. We must be able to tell, otherwise the statement lacks meaning. Dualism would be true if things behaved dualistically. The proof of the pudding isn't in the recipe, it's in the eating. Let's start with common sense. The default is dualism. If nothing is done, we're endorsing it. Either this or else a return to a state of human nature as culture devoid of civilization, lacking any feedback mechanism of any sort, thinking without language. The question is, why the perfect fit? I liken it to the glass slipper in the Cinderella story. Since it was made of glass, molded to her foot, unlike leather or other material that embraces the foot requiring only the right size with no regard to the foot details. It's perfect fit or else not at all. Of all the girl's feet in the kingdom, only hers fit. It molded perfectly to her foot simply because the mold was taken from her foot. No slack whatsoever allowed. The reason it fits perfectly is simply because it takes after the original mold as found in Genesis 1:1 to 2:3 of the creation story. This should not be taken as proof, but rather as copy of the original, with the proof itself in the original, of course. Coronavirus as King Rex virus. Coronavirus times of today's lockdown are not qualitatively different from previous crisis events, though quantitatively it seems that things are piled up all at once, of years compressed into months. Coronavirus times of Azazel, the he-goat, law of the jungle, back to animal behavior, fighting tooth and nail for survival, stark naked, going around in the nude. We compared as, goat, with human strength as meod, human might. Now let's take it to its source. Azel is like in Genesis 1:1a to c. Veha'aretz haita tohu vavohu, and the earth was chaos and empty. In Genesis 1:2, it depicts times of Azazel before the light of non-messianic times of Genesis 1:1a aleph, as in paradise. Here we have tohu vavohu sounding like saying that things were upside down and inside out in chaos before order stepped in. What needs stressing here is that the focus is on culture, go between nature and the divine, the hypotenuse. But culture has always been since creation. However, what's new now is that we're introducing our own version of things as civilization. This is recreation, as it were. We are restaging creation all over again for things just repeat themselves. The thing is getting it right. On the contrary wise, it's going to be a mess after a few turns. Never mind the nth term around. The underlying faith is that the Torah teaching is the blueprints of creation. We are entrusted to build in turn our social edifice based on it. The trick is understanding the language of architecture. The problem is telling apart, on the one hand, going to first principles, and on the other hand, coming from first principles. Well, this is the crux of the matter of the crisis of civilization. We are living in pre-dawn times of making sense of things in the world. If there's a way to best characterize the times we're living in since the last 3,000 years, it's no different from today's times of coronavirus, though intensified. The difference was that before we were clueless as to why bad things happened. We thought it must be God sent as punishment. Now we know better. If the building fell, it's no longer on account of evil in the world. It's because we didn't do the math. Failed to check out the blueprints, or else we didn't understand the language it's written in for lack of the password, as it were. This code is none other than Genesis 1:1a Aleph as paradise. Until and unless we gain awareness of it, we will just be trying out all the calamities in stock till we wise up. The wicked scapegoat is in our belly of Azazel. For purposes of expiation, the exit door from Azazel is the entrance way to a reversal constitution. Before closing, let's say a few words about delivering instruction as in education. This is about when the rubber hits the road with living in Azazel times. This is especially relevant insofar as the school went dark and the minds lit up during the lockdown. Rather, it's subtle. Delivering dualistic instruction isn't course as taken out of a box labeled dualism. Azazel times are times of dualism. White man speaks with forked tongue. If you're not teaching with triads, then you're delivering dualism. Instead of defining dualism, what it is not, let's define what is, triads. Once defining, from there onwards, if something isn't triads, that's because it's dualism. The problem with defining dualism is the same as that of identifying what is not the case. It's preferable to identify what is, and from there define triads as conforming to it. That settled, what is not is dualism. It is hard to identify dualism since it is not. However, things that do work are triads, and those that don't are not. Dualism by its very nature is have right, have wrong all of the time, and everywhere by everybody. As such, it is elusive at best. Let's continue with this train of thought. Let's start with a definition. Paradise has dualism, triadism, monism, and holism. Monism makes no sense, and dualism makes half or twice as much. Dualism is a double monism, as flipping the coin and seeing both sides but at different times, thus missing the rim takeaway altogether. Dualism is part monism and part non-monic monism, so to speak. Dualism is the result of not getting the ordinary coin lesson, not getting the lesson the lowly penny teaches us. This is more clearly highlighted in the scientific method as flowcharts of sorts. Dualism as explanation for good and evil as two independent sources. On the one hand, there is unity in one God, while on the other hand, there are two separate things of good and evil. Keeping things separate is the easy way out, but it's a cop-out. Dualism is based on two fails to come up with a unifying view of things, or ununifying view of things. Monism does come up with a unifying view of things since it is based on one of holism from the start, but lacks parts, so it's impenetrable to knowing. The challenge is how to have the best of both monism and dualism as unifying, yet having parts so as to be knowable. Well, the next number in the series of 1, 2, 3 is 4. What paradise does is combine the triad of 3 and the 1 to come up with 4 as in triad PRD and whole S. One whole S. Yesterday's monism, today's dualism, and tomorrow's triadism explained by paradise. In our terminology, dualism is P and D, missing the hinge R of triad parts PRD with one whole S in flip side shadow. Monism is solely in the role of whole S with a triad parts PRD in the background out of focus in flip side shadow. Pluralism is an attempt to reconcile monism and dualism as opposites in eclectic manner. Holism is the S of paradise. Well, that's all, people. Yours truly, Rick, your charro anusim, and GD bless. Austin, Texas, capital of the world.